Kunle Adeyemi slammed his phone on the mahogany desk, the tiny vibrations rattling his nerves more than the glass of water beside it. "If you were truly valuable, you wouldn't still be struggling," he muttered under his breath, recalling the words he'd flung at her 10 years ago. Zainab Bello, his ex-wife. The woman he had left because in his arrogance he thought she was nothing. He stared at the city through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Victoria Island office. Lagos was bright, busy, unrelenting. People were rushing, climbing, hustling for every naira, every deal. Kunle had thought he belonged here. He had thought leaving Zainab behind meant he was free. Yet today, sitting in the glass-walled boardroom with polished wood and leather chairs, Kunle felt an unfamiliar weight pressing against his chest. He didn't know it yet, but the past was about to catch up in a way he would never see coming. The assistant's voice cut through the silence. "Chairwoman Bello will be joining us shortly." Kunle blinked. The name seemed normal enough. Professional, like a title he had seen hundreds of times. But something in the way it was said made his stomach turn. Something familiar. He thought back. 10 years ago, they had been young, living in a cramped Surler apartment, barely scraping by. Kunle worked in marketing, ambitious and loud, always chasing the next promotion, the next connection, the next shiny future. Zainab, by contrast, was quiet, methodical. She worked from home, coding, analyzing, building, something he didn't understand at the time. She never flaunted it, never complained, never asked for praise. And he had despised her for it. "You're too comfortable being average," he had snapped one night, anger wrapped around his pride. "You don't dream big," he said another time, failing to see that her dreams were never small. They were invisible. He only noticed what he wanted to see, that she was poor, that she had nothing. The divorce had been clean, almost clinical. Rain hammered against their apartment windows the night he asked for it. She had listened quietly, said nothing except, "Is this really what you want?" "I can't keep carrying dead weight," he had replied without hesitation. And just like that, she disappeared. No social media updates. No cries for attention. No fight, nothing. Kunle told himself it was nothing. It was just life moving on. But now, in this boardroom, he felt it, the pause, the almost imperceptible shift in the air. He glanced at the door. He had no idea what he was about to see, but he could feel it. The calm, unshakable authority. The presence that would demand respect without asking for it. He remembered the way she had moved around their old apartment, calm even in chaos. He remembered the quiet nights she spent on her laptop, not showing off, just building. He remembered everything he had dismissed. And in that moment, before the door even opened, Kunle realized something terrifying, the woman he had called nothing. The woman he had abandoned without a second thought was not only back in his life, she had come for business, power, and influence. The air conditioner hummed. His heart thudded. He wanted to laugh. He wanted to convince himself it was someone else. But deep down he knew better. The past never forgets. And the person you underestimate the most often becomes the one you fear the most. The door opened and the room seemed to shrink. Kunle's chest tightened before his eyes even met hers. Zainab Bello, chairwoman, billionaire, the same woman he had once dismissed as too ordinary, now commanding the attention of the entire board with a quiet confidence that made everyone else seem small. She walked slowly, heels clicking softly against the marble floor, a subtle smile playing at the corners of her lips. Not condescending, not mocking, just present. The kind of presence that made you wonder why you had ever underestimated someone. Kunle's mind raced, a storm of disbelief and regret. He tried to focus on the meeting agenda, the spreadsheets, the numbers flashing on the projector, but nothing registered. Every detail faded into the background as he watched her move with deliberate precision. Every gesture controlled, every word measured. The woman who had quietly disappeared from his life had built an empire behind closed doors, and he had never seen it coming. Kunle remembered those early days vividly, the nights they spent arguing over nothing, the evenings she stayed up late while he complained about how unfair life was. He remembered mocking her thriftiness, her quiet ambition, her patience. He had thought he was teaching her a lesson, showing her the world. But in reality, she had been learning from him in ways he could never imagine. Every late night, Every silent calculation, every step he ignored, she was building something that would make him irrelevant. A voice interrupted his spiraling thoughts. Kunle, could you present the quarterly projections, please? One of her executives asked, clearly trying to keep the meeting on track. He coughed, fumbling with the clicker. The slides moved forward, but his attention was elsewhere. Every word, every slide, every chart felt trivial compared to the realization slowly sinking in. The woman he had once abandoned for being nothing had become everything. Flashbacks hit him like blows. The apartment they shared in Surler. The warm brown bag she always carried. The nights she had silently researched opportunities, saved scraps of money, learned, honed her skills. He had mocked her small ambitions while she quietly prepared for this very moment. He thought of the friends he had boasted to, the promotions he had celebrated, the pride he had swallowed like medicine. And now he understood something he had never allowed himself to see. All that pride, all that self-assuredness had blinded him to the real value she possessed. The meeting dragged on. Kunle tried to speak, to offer insights, but every sentence sounded hollow. He could see it in the subtle glances around the room. Everyone respected her. Everyone. Except him. And he was painfully aware that he was the only one carrying the weight of shared history. She finally spoke, and the words were calm, firm, deliberate. We'll be proceeding with the acquisition, and I expect full cooperation from all departments. There's no room for personal bias here, only results. Kunle's stomach sank. The room nodded. Everyone accepted her authority. Everyone but him. And he knew it. He had underestimated her, dismissed her. And now he had to answer to the very person he had once claimed had no future. As the meeting ended, he lingered, pretending to review the slides on his laptop while she spoke with another executive. His mind raced. How did she build this? How did he miss the signs? Why had he been blind for so long? And somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered, "The woman you left behind is no longer the one who needed you." Kunle leaned back in his chair, swallowing hard. He had thought he was moving forward when he left her. But in truth, he had only been running from the mirror she held up to him, the reflection of his own arrogance. Outside the boardroom, Lagos sprawled endlessly, unaware that a quiet reckoning was happening inside a glass box high above the city streets. Kunle realized with a sinking clarity that some mistakes cannot be undone. Some choices echo louder than your pride. And some people are far more dangerous to your ego than you ever imagine. Kunle stepped out of the boardroom, pretending to check emails on his phone. Every step felt heavy, measured, cautious. He could hear the soft chatter of executives behind him, their voices respectful, deferential. And then he remembered this was her world now. The one he had laughed at, dismissed, and abandoned. He walked past the windows, catching a glimpse of Lagos below. The city never paused. Cars honked. Street vendors shouted. Life surged in every direction, but Kunle felt frozen, trapped in a memory that had suddenly grown teeth. He thought of their old apartment, the peeling walls, the one tiny fridge, the faded curtains. She had spent hours there, night after night, hunched over a laptop, planning, calculating, learning. He had mocked her for being slow, ordinary, too quiet. Yet every moment he ignored her, she had been building the foundations of a life he couldn't imagine. And now, here she was, standing at the top of it, chairwoman, billionaire. The kind of success that commands silence in a room filled with people who had once thought they were untouchable. Kunle remembered a time when he had bragged about his promotion to his friends. I left her behind for a reason, he'd said, sipping expensive gin, pride swelling in his chest. She has no ambition. No drive, no money sense. I'm the one with the future. And he had meant it. Yet today, every boast rang hollow. Every memory felt like a ghost laughing at his arrogance. She didn't need him. She had never needed him. Kunle tried to shake it off. He focused on the numbers, the projections, the mergers and acquisitions charts on his laptop. But he couldn't escape the quiet authority in her voice, the way she commanded attention without raising it. Her strength wasn't loud. It was invisible, and that made it unstoppable. He remembered another memory, sharper this time. A rainy evening, their last fight before the divorce. He had stormed out, claiming he was leaving dead weight behind. She had said nothing, only looked at him with eyes that didn't plead, didn't beg, didn't hate. She had let him go. He had thought that silence was weakness. It wasn't. It had been strategy, planning, survival. Now Kunle felt the weight of it. He realized the truth. She had always been smarter than him, always stronger than him. He had been too blind, too arrogant to see it. The meeting had ended, but Kunle lingered in the empty boardroom, his reflection in the glass staring back at him. He looked successful, well-dressed, polished, but he felt small, fragile, irrelevant. The woman he had abandoned had transformed every ounce of perceived weakness into power. Every whispered joke, every late night ignored, every silent effort, she had turned them into a life he couldn't touch. He thought about how easy it would have been to underestimate her still, to write it off as luck, timing, or opportunity. But deep down, he knew better. She had planned this life quietly, carefully, and he had missed every sign. And the worst part? He had never truly left her behind. Not emotionally. Not in memory. Not in the subtle way she had always dominated the corners of his mind, the quiet reminder of his mistakes. Outside, Lagos roared on, unconcerned. But inside, Kunle felt a reckoning he hadn't prepared for. The woman he had left for being nothing was now untouchable. The world bowed to her quietly, professionally, and he was the only one who knew the bitter truth. She didn't just survive. She had thrived. Kunle clenched his fists, the urge to walk up to her, to demand an explanation, to reclaim pride bubbling up. But he stopped. He couldn't. Not yet. He had to understand the scope first, the scale of what he had ignored all these years, because some lessons are slow. Some truths hit like a tidal wave. And some people, quiet, underestimated, dismissed, hold a power you will only see when it's too late. Kunle walked through the office corridor, the hum of fluorescent lights above doing nothing to calm his racing heart. Every door he passed seemed to whisper reminders of his past arrogance. He had thought leaving Zainab behind would make him stronger, freer. Instead, every step now felt like retracing a path of mistakes he could never erase. He paused outside the CEO's glass office, pretending to read a memo. But his eyes were locked on the corner of the room where she had just met with an executive. Zainab moved with precision, words measured, gestures minimal, every glance purposeful. The staff hung on her every word. Not out of fear, out of respect. And a silent, undeniable loyalty. Kunle swallowed. He remembered their last year together, the same loyalty he had taken for granted, the quiet support she had offered in ways he never noticed. Even the way she saved, budgeted, and stayed disciplined while he chased flashy deals seemed trivial at the time. Now, he realized he had been blind to a strategy that had quietly outpaced him at every turn. He sat at his desk, pretending to type, but every keystroke was a struggle to focus. He thought about the board meeting he had just left, the way she commanded attention without raising her voice, the subtle cues she gave that made everyone feel included yet completely aware that she was in charge. It wasn't just confidence, it was preparation, intellect, and patience. The kind he had laughed at years ago. Kunle's phone vibrated. A message from a colleague. Zainab just finalized the acquisition deal. Congrats? He didn't respond. The words felt like a slap. Acquisition. Finalized. Done. She had played the game silently, perfectly, and he had only just realized it. His pride, once so unshakable, felt brittle, fragile, ready to snap under the weight of truth. Flashbacks crowded his mind. The Surler apartment, the worn laptop bag, the quiet nights she spent coding or analyzing data. He had mocked her thriftiness, her silence, her patience. He remembered telling his friends, "I left her because she had no ambition." And now, here she was. Proving that ambition doesn't always scream, it grows quietly, imperceptibly, until it's unstoppable. Kunle clenched his fists. He wanted to confront her, to ask how she had done it, to reclaim some ounce of control. But the longer he stared, the more he realized he couldn't. Not yet. Not while the truth remained partially hidden. The quiet power she wielded was layered, nuanced, and it intimidated him in ways he hadn't felt before. He thought about pride, about arrogance, about the man he had been, the one who measured worth in outward displays of success, status, and approval. Zainab had never played that game. She had played another one entirely, building, learning, growing while he chased shadows. And now, in this sleek office high above the streets of Lagos, her strategy had materialized into something untouchable. Kunle leaned back, rubbing his temples. Anger bubbled beneath the surface, a bitter mix of regret and awe. He had left her behind thinking she would fade, thinking her silence was weakness. But he had been wrong. And the realization cut deeper than he expected. Outside the glass walls, the city moved on. Street vendors, danfo buses, motorbikes weaving between cars, life pressed forward, indifferent to his internal reckoning. But inside, in this controlled, air-conditioned space, Kunle felt a storm raging. The woman he had dismissed, mocked, abandoned, was quietly rewriting his reality. And in that moment, he understood the most terrifying truth. Some mistakes are irreversible. Some people, underestimated and overlooked, quietly become forces you cannot challenge, not without confronting your own arrogance first. Kunle sat there, heart pounding, staring at the corner of the room where Zainab had once been just his wife, and now was the woman who controlled his entire world professionally and emotionally. For the first time in years, he felt small, and that feeling was only the beginning. The office hummed with quiet efficiency, but Kunle felt like the world had narrowed to the space between himself and Zainab. Every word she spoke, every decision she made, echoed in his mind like a silent accusation. He had been wrong, catastrophically wrong, and the weight of that mistake pressed on him with every breath. He thought of the past, of surreal nights lit by a single bulb, when she sat across from him, quietly working while he raged about bills, promotions, and dreams too loud for their cramped apartment. He had mocked her patience, her thriftiness, her silence. Dead weight, he had called it. And now he saw the truth. It had all been preparation, all hidden beneath a calm surface he had mistaken for weakness. Kunle's hands shook slightly as he opened his laptop again, pretending to review reports. But he couldn't focus. The numbers blurred, the charts made no sense. All he could see were memories of her, the quiet determination. The late nights, the meticulous planning he had dismissed as ordinary, that word tasted bitter now, like ash in his mouth. He remembered their last argument vividly. Rain beating the zinc roof, voices raised but carefully measured. He had demanded more, criticized more, torn down what she had built in silence. And she had said one thing, calmly, simply, "Is this truly what you want?" At the time, he had scoffed. Now the question haunted him like a ghost. A knock at the door snapped him back to the present. One of her assistants stepped in. "Chairwoman Bello requested you in her office, Kunle. She said it's urgent." Urgent. That word sent a shiver through him. He followed down the hallway, every step heavy, the polished floor reflecting his apprehensive reflection. He remembered how he had once walked beside her with pride, arrogance swelling in his chest. Now he walked with dread. When he entered the office, Zainab looked up from her desk. She didn't stand immediately, didn't smile, didn't speak. She simply regarded him with that calm, unshakable poise that made him feel like the boy he once was, lost and small. "Kai," she said softly. Not mocking, not cold, but deliberate. "You've been reviewing the quarterly projections." "Yes," Kunle muttered, his voice tighter than he expected. "I just want to make sure." She held up a hand. "Sit. We need to discuss something important." He obeyed, chest tight, stomach twisting. She leaned back slightly, and for a moment it seemed she would simply let the silence stretch. And then she said it. "I know what you thought of me 10 years ago." Kunle froze. The words weren't cruel, they were almost gentle, but every syllable struck like lightning. "You thought I was nothing," she continued. "Too quiet, too slow, not ambitious enough. You left because you believed you were entitled to more than what I offered. You were wrong." The room seemed to shrink. His mind raced, scrambling for a response, a defense, an excuse, but none came. "And yet," she said, leaning forward now, eyes glinting, "here I am. Chairwoman of this company. Billionaire. And every decision I make now directly affects you." Kunle felt the floor shift beneath him. The puzzle pieces of the past decade, the nights he had mocked her, the times he had called her dead weight, all slotted into place. She hadn't just survived. She had thrived. She had quietly, meticulously built a life from the ashes he had left behind. And now he understood the terrifying truth. The woman he abandoned was the one who truly held power. Kunle's throat went dry as he watched her stand, every movement deliberate, poised, controlled. The chairwoman he had underestimated, the ex-wife he had abandoned, now radiated power he couldn't touch. He had thought he held the cards that his career, his status, his pride would shield him. But she held the world quietly, completely, in ways he hadn't even imagined. "Kunle," she began, voice calm but firm. "I built this life alone. Every investment, every strategy, every partnership, I did it. And it started long before you walked away." He swallowed, the words catching somewhere between guilt and awe. "You thought I was poor, powerless, ordinary," she continued. "But the truth is, you left me with nothing, and I turned that nothing into everything." Her eyes soft, but only for a heartbeat. Then they hardened again with that same unstoppable focus that had dominated the boardroom all morning. "I invested quietly, saved, learned, and took risks while you flaunted your promotions and parties. You laughed at my thriftiness. You mocked my silence. And all the while, I was preparing the life I would never have to beg anyone to respect, especially someone who once abandoned me." Kunle felt his chest tighten. Every memory of arrogance, of cruelty, of carelessness slammed into him like waves he couldn't outrun. He had thought leaving her behind was freedom. It was a cage. "And now," Zainab said, taking a small step closer, "you're here, watching, realizing that the woman you dismissed is the one in charge, the one holding power, the one who decides the deals, the money, the future." He wanted to speak, to explain, to defend himself, but no words could undo the years of misjudgment. He had called her weak. She had called herself unstoppable. "And what will you do now?" she asked quietly, almost gently. "Stand there, humbled? Beg for recognition, or learn from what you ignored?" Kunle looked away. The floor reflected the city lights below, mocking him silently. He thought of the nights he had yelled at her, the times he had belittled her choices. The pride that had once made him feel untouchable. It was gone, shattered, and in its place, awe, regret, a bitter understanding of the woman he had always underestimated. She smiled faintly, not triumphantly, but with the calm assurance of someone who had walked through fire and come out golden. "I'm not here to punish you, Kunle. I'm here to show you what's possible when you never let someone else's opinion define your worth." Her words hit him harder than any argument could have. He realized that her silence had always been a shield, a strategy, a preparation. She had waited, worked, and grown while he had flaunted his temporary successes. "And now," she said, turning to leave the office, "you get to witness what you once ignored. Remember it." Kunle sat frozen. The echo of her heels faded down the hallway. The world outside carried on, cars honking, buses roaring, street vendors shouting, but inside, he felt the full weight of his mistake. The woman he had abandoned was untouchable, unstoppable, indestructible. The same woman he had called nothing was now everything. He realized finally that life had a cruel but perfect way of teaching lessons. Pride had blinded him. Arrogance had made him deaf. And underestimation had cost him everything he thought mattered. Zainab had walked through fire, built an empire, and risen above the ashes. She had needed him, and she had never been weak. Kunle exhaled slowly, the city lights reflecting in his eyes, and understood the truth. The woman he had left behind wasn't just successful. She was the definition of power, and he would never forget it.